Joining me is Steve Willis to talk about brand new transfer Jeremiah Dillon. He's going to be a monster in this offense, and we'll get to that here just a second. This is Locked On Vandy.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every single day. And speaking of every day, I couldn't do it without you everydayers. I don't know how many of you are actually out there, but I hope it keeps doubling each and every day, and that's a good thing. So today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Well, it's a very, very special episode. As you can see, off to my left, to your right, it is Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss show. Why is he here, you may ask? Well, Jeremiah Dillon transferred into Vanderbilt. He's a wide receiver, an electric wide receiver from Ole Miss, and Steve is going to tell me just what he brings to the table and how he's going to fit into the scheme. So, Steve, the very, very first question is, what on earth are we getting with Jeremiah Dillon?
You're getting a smooth wide receiver. It's an explosive wide receiver. And people are going to say, well, he didn't play that much at Ole Miss. Ole Miss's wide receiver room is very, very talented, as Vandy fans would be very well aware of. And they don't play people. So it's kind of hard to move up the depth chart because Lane Kiffin's kind of one of those coaches, either you perform or you watch. He doesn't have any patience for on-the-job training. So it's just a perform or watch type situation. But Jeremiah Dillon, he comes out of, I don't know, I forget the locations, either Tylertown or Sumrall, somewhere in the Pine Belt of South Mississippi. He was a 4-star receiver out of high school. Very smooth player. You look at him, the route running that happens. He has all the tools necessary where you just expected him to be one of the receivers that broke out. It never really happened at Ole Miss. So it's going to be like Brandon Buckhalter when he went to UAB. Other wide receivers have left Ole Miss and went to a new locations and they've been pretty productive. And I'm expecting Jeremiah to follow suit doing that.
Well, it's a new scheme, and I don't know how familiar you are with New Mexico State. I've become a lot more familiar with New Mexico State over the last few weeks than I have all season. I just had the one game that we all watched against Auburn. Like, what did you notice? Like I said, that might be the only game you watched, and you may only watch part of it. But what did you notice about Tim Beck's offense and how Jeremiah Dillon is going to be a factor into it?
Well, I know that Tim Beck, he uses the tight ends. He uses the backs, and everything's designed to slow it down. I don't know how much that is going to translate over in the SEC. I can see what they're thinking. If that worked at New Mexico State, that might work at Vanderbilt as well. You saw New Mexico State use that template against Auburn during the season. But what Jeremiah Dillon's going to be is the person that can take the top off the defense to keep the safeties from sagging down on those tight ends and those running backs in the middle of the field to open up about what this offense can be in totality. I know they have a quarterback coming in from Utah that is an athletic, good player. And I think you're going to see a plus version of what Beck did at New Mexico State when he had Diego Pavia and those guys. They're going to do all the tempo and all of that stuff, but there's a certain element of creativity in the way that they use their weapons that is going to be opened up even more by the speed and the big play and the deep shot ability of Jeremiah Dillon.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right there, and I think in the play action game is going to be a huge part of what Dillon brings to the table here because and even the RPO game, the third level RPO game where you're running glance routes and fades to good surfaces with corners and safeties coming down to fit the run, and you're going to see him get behind some guys in SEC play even, and it's going to be really, really good. There was a specific concept that they scored on against, I believe it was, all the games are running together now, but I think it was against Fresno State, or it may have been against Liberty, but they had a 2x2 set. They had it, and it was the ball's on the left hash, so the left side receivers were into the boundary, and the two, and then the two field receivers were split way out. They ran a clear out. They ran a deep sit with number 2. They ran a clear out seam with number 2 to the boundary, and they crossed under with number 1, the boundary number 1. They crossed him under, and then he climbed as soon as he got to the hash. He climbed and ran almost like I call it a divide route, where he divides the safeties. But what it did was it put that field safety in a bind, to where he's either got to cover the deep sit or he's got to cover the boundary number 1 coming across. Corner's going with the clear out, and there's a run fake too, so it sucked the linebackers down, and the safety played flat footed, ran the receiver, the boundary 1 ran right across the safety's face. They threw it to him. Big play. It was either a touchdown or a big play, and it was a really, really nice concept. And I broke this down in one of my previous episodes, so go back and check out the breakdown of that concept. So I think he's going to fit in really nicely there.
Well, you have a situation with Vandy's offensive line. That's going to be the real key to this offense.
Mm-hmm.
Can you protect? Because a lot of what Tim Beck and New Mexico State did, and what I'm assuming they're going to try and do at Vanderbilt, was kind of slow developing type plays, where the athleticism, where you can put the defense in a little bit of a bind, kind of scheming plays open, because that's what they had to do at New Mexico State because of the athletic deficiency that you were dealing with at New Mexico State. You're probably going to run into something similar to that at Vanderbilt playing in the Southeastern Conference. Can Vandy offensive linemen hold up for that 2.5, 3 seconds to allow stuff like that to happen? It helped that Diego Pavia, a high school wrestler, a kind of an athlete type guy, tough as nails. I mean, who is Vanderbilt's quarterback going to honestly fit that mold?
I think he will. He's a way more athletic version of Diego Pavia. He's not quite as polished of a passer, probably. He's pretty close, but also I think scheme wise, you mentioned he schemes things up. I think the motions, the different looks, the different formations, the packaged plays, the RPOs, things that really kind of get this offense going, that prevent these defenders from pinning their ears back and coming after you. And it's not just straight drop back every single time. Most of his stuff has window dressing and play fakes to it, which is what I think makes it dangerous. And I think that's what helped against Auburn. Was Auburn couldn't really get a beat on what was going on. They played a step and a half slower, and that changes everything.
Yeah, it really does. And that's the amazing thing when you watch that game, is that it wasn't a fluke that New Mexico State won that football game.
It was not. They had Auburn's head spinning all night long.
You just saw what the best could be at Vanderbilt within that Tim Beck offense.
Yeah, and I think that's your ceiling, because you got far more athletic guys than what New Mexico State had. I mean, you got Nate Johnson, who's a way more athletic quarterback and can do more with his legs and even with his arm too. He's played in some, and he played in a pretty well-versed or diversified offense in what they did. They did some under center stuff. They did some spread RPO stuff. They did some option stuff at Utah. They did a lot of different things, and he played really well within that. You get Jeremiah Dillon, who's somebody that's real smooth, can take the lid off. And then you have you had Keyshawn Johnson. Unfortunately, he decommitted, but you also have Loic Foungy from Texas Tech. I'm pretty sure I butchered that name, but he's kind of a taller, probably more of a possession guy. And then Tyler Fortenberry, who's your star tight end, who was the number 1 transfer tight end in the portal.
He's out of Colin, right? He's a JUCO kid out of Mississippi, right?
JUCO kid out of Colin. You're exactly right. He was a quarterback out of high school, converted to tight end, big athletic guy, plays the ball really well in the air.
Hey, Ole Miss has one of those guys as well in Caden Prescorn. He was a high school quarterback that converted to tight end at Memphis, and we've all saw what Caden Prescorn can do in the tight end position, as he potentially is going to be one of the better ones in college football next year.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That guy was incredible in the Peach Bowl. Dude, the one hand catch after one hand catch after one hand catch. I was starting to wonder if he knows how to catch with two hands.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he just thought since he was playing tight end in Georgia, he just thought he was Brock Bowers for the day. Yeah, I mean, that's
win in Rome, I guess, right?
Right.
God, that game was like to do that against a Big Ten team, just to kind of shred Penn State like y'all did, man. That was incredible to see, because that shut a lot of people up, because everybody's like, oh, Penn State this, Penn State that. They're going to run all over Ole Miss. Ole Miss is soft. You saw what they did against Georgia. They're soft, and soft they weren't.
Yeah, Ole Miss doesn't play Vanderbilt next year, and that's probably a good thing, because Ole Miss is probably going to be a preseason top 5 team next year. And
I guess we'll have to settle for Bama, Texas, and LSU.
Yeah. Yes. Hey, does Vandy get Auburn?
Yes.
There you go. There's your W right there.
We're hiring the entire New Mexico State staff. It seems like I think it hadn't been official, but we're getting their defensive coordinator to come coach DBs. We're getting their head coach possibly as an analyst. That's not final, but it's going to happen. And then of course we've got their backup quarterback, and I think we're going to get a corner or safety from them as well. Like, we're going to get all their transfers too.
Hey, to me, that's incredibly smart. If you're Vanderbilt, you take a 9-win, 10-win team out of that conference, and you bring some players that know how to win to install that culture into other athletes. Like Jeremiah Dillon is a good athlete. The quarterback is a good athlete. You do need some culture guys and some people. You're a high school coach, Corey. You know how important culture is. And if you don't win, if you have never been on a team that's winning, it is so hard to get that over the hump. These kids that are going to come from New Mexico State, and it is absolutely blowing my mind that I'm saying this, are going to come with the attitude that they know how to win football games, and they can institute this culture, and they have a learning curve and a knowledge curve that's going to be so much ahead of what the other players are going to do. I think this is a win-win situation for the Doors. I really do.
Absolutely. I mean, well, Nate Johnson's coming from a winning culture at Utah. I mean, you saw what they did without Cameron Rising. Like, they played him. They were able to redshirt him. And he played a lot, completely torched Florida. I mean, Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches in all of college football. So he's coming from a really good program. Texas Tech has had a pretty good culture, not necessarily winning culture, but they've done much better than they have a few years prior to hiring. I think his name is McGuire, Jerry McGuire. No, I think his name is McGuire.
Show me the money. Oh,
Joey McGuire, I think is what his name.
Texas Tech.
Yeah. So I mean, they, and they're getting interior linemen from Mississippi State, and they're getting some good defensive pieces as well. So they've done really well in the transfer portal, I think. And you probably are familiar with some of the, being an Ole Miss guy, you're probably familiar with the boys down the road a little bit and some of their rosters, because you guys are bitter rivals, and I'm sure each of you have studied each other's rosters. But we're getting an interior lineman, Stephen Lasoya. I don't know if you know anything about him.
Honestly, I was just going to be real with everybody, and if either one of the Mississippi State fans that are listening, I haven't really paid attention to their roster, because they haven't been in the same area code the last couple of years as Ole Miss. So whenever you said his name, that's the first time I'd heard it, honestly.
Yeah. Well, Steve, before we let you go, man, two things before we let you go. To all my newly found audience, this guy right over here sat just like this next to me at the rivals.com offices in the video department. Both him and I were chopping away at recruit highlights, and from all walks of the country, and all nooks and every nook and cranny from the United States. We were probably cutting their film. So that's how I got to know this guy. And then this is the reason why I'm here, actually. So if you haven't, follow him at the Stephen Willis. So Steve, SEC basketball is happening. Conference slate begins. Vandy opens up with Alabama. What's going on with Ole Miss? You guys finished undefeated in non-conference play, 13-0, I believe, right?
Yes, number 22 in the country, believe it or
22
not.
in the country.
Hmm.
Who do y'all open with? What can we look forward to eventually when we play Ole Miss?
They're good. It's not going to be the same team that you saw over the last couple of years. They've added Alan Flanagan, who in this Chris Beard system is a really good basketball player. They've added Brandon Murray from Georgetown. They've added Juju Murray from St. Peter's. If you remember their magical run that they went in the NCAA tournament, they've added Juju Murray from him. Yeah.
Oh.
And then Matthew Morrell is back, and he gets to be like the number 3 or 4 option. And all of a sudden, he's a dead-eye shooter. Whenever he was the number 1 scoring option, he struggled. Now that he's number 4, he's averaging 17 points a game and shooting about 50% from 3. And Ole Miss opens up their SEC slate at Thompson-Boling Arena in East Tennessee, playing against the number 5 Tennessee Volunteers. So there's a chance that Ole Miss could get popped this weekend, but there's also a chance that some more specialness can happen because Ole Miss is 13-0. They won 12 games last year. They've already won 13, and they've gotten to the point where if they go 9-9 in SEC play, that's like a 23-win season, and they're dancing. So I'm pretty fired up about all that. I think they'll be pretty good, but I hate that they're opening with Tennessee to start out. It always seems they either open up with Kentucky when Kentucky is like nationally relevant, or Tennessee, whoever the team is in the SEC that's supposed to be nationally relevant that year. Ole Miss travels on the road to open their season against that team. It's the weirdest thing. I think Ole Miss played Bruce Pearl Tennessee teams when they were so good. They've been to Rupp's like several times in January. It's kind of hilarious, but yeah, I guess get them out of the way early, right?
Yeah, right. Just go ahead. If you're going to take the L and move on and clean it up. So one of the things that about Ole Miss hiring Chris Beard, that was a debated topic based on what he was going through at the time when he was hired. I guess all that's blown over and things are he's recruiting his tail off, man. He's been really, really well.
Yeah, it turns out that the top 5 college basketball coach is a really good college basketball coach. I mean, Chris Beard, whenever it comes to him actually doing that job and everything, it's kind of hard to argue about how good he is. I don't know what happened in Austin. Nobody knows what happened in Austin. But in Oxford, he's been a model citizen. He's running a very good program, and he's already won more games this season than Ole Miss won last season. And you're going to get a lot of grace if you can do that.
Absolutely, especially at Ole Miss, because like things have been pretty lean and pretty tough at Ole Miss. I can imagine. They're pretty lean and pretty tough at Vanderbilt at this moment. Jerry Stackhouse does not have any grace right now. They struggled and then finally found their groove against mighty Dartmouth.
Yes.
Mighty Dartmouth.
They have Keggy the Keg, right?
They have Keggy, the big green. Dartmouth had this kid, I swear, he is a redhead kid. He looked 12. He looked like he was at Dartmouth Middle School. And he played. He got minutes, like significant minutes.
I just picture like Greg McElroy, like to this day.
Just imagine a scrawny Greg McElroy.
Yeah.
Like non-football version Greg McElroy, and that's this kid. So, but Steve, man, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on. Jeremiah Dillon, somebody to get excited for on the football side of things, and Ole Miss basketball. I guess Vandy's going to have their work cut out for him against Chris Beard and the crew.
Yeah, and anybody that's watching this show, going over to Locked On Ole Miss, subscribe to the podcast. We're almost to 6,000 subscribers.
There you go.
We would appreciate that very much, and I'm going to help Corey out as much as I can, honestly, man. I'm proud of you, Corey, and you got this job because of you, not because of me, man.
Well, you put me in contact, and you're the reason why I even looked at Locked On Podcast Network. So, and I definitely appreciate that. And Steve, we'll talk to you later, man.
Take care, buddy.
Thank you, man. You too.
All right.
All right. This episode, thank you, Steve. Man, Steve is such a delight, man. But this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever had a frustrating ticket buying experience? I have, and I'm sure you have as well. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Gametime is fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So what are some things that you can get with Gametime? Well, you get last-minute tickets. You get flash deals, zone deals. I'll talk to you about those in a minute. Easy to find. Buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. You get the views from your seat. You can click right on your seat and see what you're going to see. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and job loss protection. Like I said, you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. The all-in prices show you your total upfront. You know you're getting a great deal before you check out. There's no surprise, no hidden fees. Gametime has deals right up to the start of the event. It's easy, 2 taps. You find exclusive flash deals, sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Zone deals, you pick the seat or you pick the section. Gametime picks the seats. You get big time savings there if you allow them to do that. Gametime has also a guarantee called the Gametime guarantee. Means you'll always get the best price no matter what. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON. Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, welcome back. We're gonna wrap up this show. Steve, man, he's such a great dude, man. If you want to, after you watch this show, you should really go watch Locked On Ole Miss. I mean, it's an incredible show. There's a reason why he started from scratch and he's up to 6,000 subscribers. The guy is just, he's a total pro. So you should go listen to him, go check him out. All right. That's where I want to get to. I want to get to 6,000 subs. So that can happen. Also check on Locked On SEC as well. Chris Gordy and his crew does a tremendous job there. I was on their show a few weeks ago. Just incredible stuff. We talked about Nate Johnson, actually. So if you listen to that from an Ole Miss guy and you're not fired up about Jeremiah Dillon, you're probably just not fired up about anything. He's a smooth guy, good route runner, fast, electric, just somebody that he's going to be the strike up the band guy, right? Because when Vandy's running, and then they pop one over the top to Jeremiah Dillon, his stat line's probably always going to be 3 or 4 catches for like 130 and like 2 tutties. And that's probably what his stat line's going to be. Let's just be honest about that. Like Vandy's not going to throw it a ton. Like I don't think he's ever really going to have like one of those games where he's like got 12 catches for 175 and 3 touchdowns. Like I don't think he's ever going to have that game because Vandy's not going to throw that much probably. And let's face it, they still got some offensive line concerns that they need to fix before they even think about having one of those type of games. But nonetheless, I think he's going to have a 3 or 4 catch for a lot of yards and some touchdowns, or he's going to catch some slants for some RPO slants for some touchdowns. He's going to do that. Also, they're getting serious about special teams. You lose Matthew Hayball. He was an All-American, second teamer. But you get Jesse Mirco. He committed to Vanderbilt today. He's rated as a number 4 punter in the class of 2021. He was a Ray Guy semifinalist a year ago. He had 50 punts last year, averaging 43.5 yards per punt. His longest punt was 72 yards at Ohio State. They punted a lot more this year than they did last year. He's an Australian guy. There's something about these Aussies, man, when they come and punt. They as Pat McAfee would say, he murders the football when he kicks. So it's phenomenal, man. So welcome him into the fold. So Jesse Mirco, brand new punter, going to add a whole new dimension to this team, and being able to flip the field is a huge weapon for a team like Vandy because their defense is going to be much improved. So we're in business, man. We're in business. That's all I'm going to say about that. We're going to take a quick break. I know we had these breaks like back to back and crammed together, but we're going to take another break here, and we're going to We're going to come back. We're going to finish the show with some hodgepodge thoughts, and we're going to get this thing out of here. All right. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can do some cool stuff. NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. That's pretty cool. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find parlays, and much, much more. So same game parlays, player props, parlays are some of my favorite things, like the anytime touchdowns. I love betting those. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right. Well, let's get right on out of here, man. So like I said, I think this offense is going to be really, really good. I think if you watch New Mexico State and watch what they were able to do, I think you're going to find that the scheme fit that's coming with Tim Beck, I think is going to be really, really good for what Vanderbilt's trying to do. Vanderbilt needs to be unique. It's going to be a unique environment. Just like in basketball, it's a unique environment. So you need a unique style of play. You need something that is different. And different is good. Like Mississippi State, when they were good with Mike Leach, God rest his soul, they were air raid. The SEC wasn't ready for air raid. Air raid is a good equalizer. Now, sometimes you just can't equalize no matter what because there's such a talent gap. But in a lot of games that are close that you should possibly win, you have that opportunity. And Vandy is doing that with this offensive scheme. And I think Vandy's also doing that by Clark Lee taking back over the defense. I think you're finally getting some, quote, adults in the room here that know what they're doing, coordinating each side of the ball. And now you got another special teams weapon and Jesse Mirco. And you're going to have some really, really good things going on in the punting game as well. So I'm excited about Vanderbilt football. I know that's really difficult to say coming on the heels of a 2-10 team, but again, everyone loves the underdog, and I think they've added some pieces. They still got some pieces to go. They still got some things to add, and I think they will. But there's still some things that are on the precipice to add for this team. So I'm really excited about it. You should be too. Basketball opens up the conference season with Alabama. We're going to have Jake Thomas on from Tide Talk Live, hopefully, to discuss a little bit about what to expect from Alabama in terms of matchup stuff. So that should be hopefully tomorrow's episode, if we can coordinate a time. If not, we're going to preview that game no matter what. So be ready for that. And also the women tip off tomorrow. Or actually, as you're listening to this, I'm recording this on a Wednesday night. They tip off tonight against Mississippi State. I misspoke on that one, so I apologize there. They open up their conference slate on the road at Mississippi State. Their home opener is on Sunday against Florida. So stay tuned for that. But this is gonna be an interesting basketball season. You've got some really, really good teams in this league. Ole Miss, Tennessee's ranked 5th. Auburn's really good. Kentucky's always good. Georgia's winning 7 games in a row, so they're no longer pushovers. So Missouri is usually a pretty tough out. So you've got some good basketball teams in this league to contend with, but there's certainly also some very, very winnable games too with Florida, Arkansas, Mississippi State. There's some winnable games there. You can maybe catch a Georgia team sleeping like you can catch some of these teams when they come into Memorial, they kind of get lulled to sleep with the unique environment. Like there's been times where Vanderbilt has caught teams like that. They've caught Tennessee like that recently. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Coach Stackhouse plays out this thing. And but we'll see that kind of happen, and we'll see the precedent that's going to be set for the conference season. But we're gonna end on that, man. It was a really seemed like a really fast show with Steve on here. And I thank him for joining again. Check him out, Locked On Ole Miss. And then, of course, make that your second listen because you're right here. And thank you to the everydayers. And real quick, take a screenshot of that. Follow us on social media, X and Instagram. Thank you to the everydayers. You make this all possible. But until tomorrow, we're gonna finish out the week. We're gonna get you into the weekend with a really good show on the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Until next time, anchor down.